Trial Lawyers University, where the Titans come to train. Produced and powered by LawPods.
Well, we got Ryan Skiver with us here today, all the way from Arizona. And Ryan and I have been going back a little ways, crossing paths. And what makes Ryan special? I don't know. Tell us, Ryan, what makes you special?
I don't know that there's anything that makes me special. I think the thing that has helped me the most is hard work. I was raised in the Midwest, and I always was taught that if you put in the time and the effort, that it will pay off. So I think anybody can do what I do. It just takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and really working to educate yourself and improve.
Those are key things, the constant desire to improve and the discipline to train. Because a lot of people want to get better, but they just make explanations and excuses that about not having time. And because like, oh, you don't have time. We all got the same time. So if you're not making time, just forget about it, right? Because then you're just making excuses. It's just the reality of it. So Ryan, before we get into your journey and all the work that you've done, the mentors you seeked out or sucked out, I don't know what the rest of seeking is, and that have helped you in the reading and the programs you've taken along the way. Before we get out of that, tell us about how the big idea to become a lawyer crossed your mind at what point of life?
Well, it's funny. My grandma originally told me that she thought I would either be a lawyer or an actor, and I didn't really agree with her. My dad was a doctor, and he actually went to night school to become a lawyer. After he became a lawyer, he started defending doctors in malpractice cases. He would come home and talk about his cases with me. So I would get the chance to issue spot and kind of learn from him what he was trying to figure out on his cases. And I always found that to be interesting. But then I went to college and I majored in finance. I was planning on doing that when I was done. I worked all kinds of jobs when I was in undergrad for finance. I worked at a bank. I did venture capital. I worked for Merrill Lynch making cold calls, which was miserable. I worked at HBO in participations and residuals. I actually got caught falling asleep one time there because it was so boring. And then after I came out of college, there were no jobs and I didn't really want to do that boring work. So my dad suggested law school. And since I like public speaking and competition, I figured, I'd give it a try. So I took a year off and lived in Los Angeles because I knew I wanted to be in a big city. So it was LA, New York, Chicago. I was sick of freezing my ass off in Ohio. So it became LA. So I moved out there for a year, worked for Procter & Gamble, going around to different stores and things like that, making sure their products were there. Then as part of that time also, I worked for a post-production company, driving videos back and forth and getting food for celebrities and things like that. Then I also worked as an extra for fun on TV shows and movies. Took that year off, went to Southwestern, which was the only 2-year program in the country at the time. So I started there, and then I actually liked it and realized that I wanted to study abroad and to be able to work for a law firm during the summer. So I switched to the 3-year program. I was able to study abroad in Madrid, which was a lot of fun. And then I worked for the DA's office at the last year, basically the summer before and the last year, and I got to do my first jury trial. It was a recanting victim in a domestic violence case. So I really didn't have much support. And the DAs or assistant DAs all told me I was going to lose. And somehow I ended up pulling it out and getting guilty, which was amazing because that guy deserved to be found guilty based on his rap sheet and everything else he had done. That didn't get to come in. But I just fell in love with it. I loved being in front of a jury, and I loved being able to seek justice.
So you go to Southwestern, you get to study abroad. What was the best thing about studying abroad? Because I never got to study abroad in law school or college, and everybody talks about it, just has the most faces light up when you talk about studying abroad. So,
absolutely. I actually studied abroad in undergrad in London. That was the first time. And I got to travel, went to 9 different countries, And you get to meet people and really understand people better, which is one of the things that I love. So I wanted to get back over to Europe and study abroad again so that I could do the same thing. So I hit another 9 or 10 countries that trip as well and went all over Spain. But really, it's seeing the different cultures and understanding that not everybody's the same. People have different perspectives. And that really, I think, comes into play also as a trial lawyer, because you have to realize not everybody thinks like you. And to be able to communicate with them, you have to understand where they're coming from.
You said you went to Southwestern and you got to participate a little bit in a trial. Did you do anything else in law school as far as mock trial or trial ad to get yourself prepared, or kind of headed towards the direction of being a trial lawyer?
I did. I was on the trial ad team, which was really interesting and a lot of fun. We had 2 great instructors who worked for the LA DA's office in the major crimes and gang unit. So they had a ton of trial experience and really helped us to understand the presentation and what you're going for as part of cross-examination and things like that. So they were also the ones who helped us get jobs at the DA's office to get the trial experience. That was my favorite class by far, or extracurricular or whatever you might call it in law school.
Okay, so you do your 3 years at Southwestern, you got your little bit of experience in the courtroom with your one criminal case, your trial ad. So when you first get out, where does Ryan Skiver get his first paying job?
So when I first came out, I was going to work for the DA's office in LA, but I lived in Redondo Beach. And so they told me that I had a 50-50 shot of either being in Torrance, which is where I had been, or in Compton. I didn't think that I would do very well in Compton. So I didn't really want to take that risk of winding up there and having to walk into the courthouse every day, from the parking lot and out of the courthouse. So I decided to move up my planned schedule of moving to Arizona. So I moved to Arizona and took the bar exam here immediately after. So California was 2005, Arizona was 2006. And then I needed to find work while I waited for my results. So I just started sending out resumes and cover letters because I did not know anybody. Basically just went through the state bar website looking at all the different names of firms. And I made it to the letter B before I got some interviews and actually got offered a job with a law firm who handled construction law.
Is that where you started out, with the construction law firm?
It is. And it was not necessarily the work that I knew I wanted to do, but I needed work and I needed money. So I started, handling construction litigation. People are fighting over, 3 screws missing from a door and spending thousands and thousands of dollars. I didn't just put the screws in yourself. Why are we dealing with this issue? But then we also added family law. So I was like, okay, I get to try something else. And that was even more miserable. I felt horrible for these families and what they were going through, the worst experience of their lives. And then they would get a trial for 2 hours or 4 hours. And these kids' lives would be decided, you're going to go stay with them or do this. And it just wasn't the work I wanted to do.
I had a couple family law cases in my youth, and the most difficult clients and most horrible of situations and most emotionally draining work there is. Anybody does family law, God bless you, but it's not for me. So you do that construction litigation. How long do you stay with that when they add the family law component?
I was with that firm for 3 years. And then I decided I was going to go out on my own, start my own firm. And the firm we shared office space with actually heard I was leaving and asked me if I wanted to come and practice with them.
Is that what you did?
I did. I figured having the safety net of them handing me cases would be nice to make sure I at least had some guaranteed income. And it just so happened that they did personal injury law. I never thought I would get into personal injury law. It never crossed my radar in law school of what I would do. I figured it'd be some type of business litigation or something like that. But they did personal injury law, and they were pretty well established here in Phoenix.
So how long do you spend with this firm doing the personal injury before you move on? And what did you learn there?
So one of the partners came into my office and handed me a book and said, here, read this. We're going to a seminar in a couple weeks. So I said, okay. So got the book, read the book, and we signed up for this seminar. And the book was The Reptile. So I went to my first seminar on personal injury law, and it was Don Keenan and David Ball talking about their book, The Reptile. And it was really interesting, and it just made sense to me to start with the defendant and their conduct as opposed to focusing on the plaintiff right out of the bat because of the things like the negative attribution and juries thinking the plaintiff is the reason we're there as opposed to the reality of the defendant's conduct and their actions is what brought us there. So I really enjoyed that first conference and decided to follow up with that and go to another conference.
And so that started your journey of learning as far as the strategy and skills of a trial lawyer, and which I want to spend a great deal of time talking with you about because you, I believe, have done more variety of programs than anybody I know, even myself. And I've been involved in a lot of different programs, except for ones that they expressly forbid me to come to. Like I signed up for Rick Friedman's the program he does. I was all signed up, ready to go. And Rick Friedman called me and said, Dan, you are not a good candidate for my program. I'm like, okay. So I get rejected before they even meet me sometimes. But like, he's like, I heard you have an abrasive personality. I'm like, I've been working on it, but apparently not hard enough. But I continue to work on it. But before we get into talking about your educational and journey in that way, I want to finish up with how you got to start in your own firm still, because now you're at this other firm with the partner there. You're learning about the Reptile, and what happens from there. You take it to the big first conference, with the job, the profession wise, though.
Sure. Yeah. So with that firm, I kind of, like I said, I had my own practice within the firm. They had a really nice setup, so I could, grow as I wanted to, add paralegals and things like that. So I think the first part of it, I actually just did it all myself because I didn't want to take a draw. I didn't want to, do that. I wanted to be hungry and make sure that I worked as hard as I could to make money first. So I worked 16 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week to get to the point where I could actually make money, because obviously personal injury is all contingency. So I finally did that and then built up my practice, added paralegals, and then got to a point where I made partner there and was the partner there for a while. So 2010 to 2016, I was with that firm. And then I decided, and we both kind of agreed that we had kind of outgrown each other in the way that we were handling cases. I wanted to handle less cases and bigger cases, and they do a great job of handling a good amount of cases without doing too many. But I really wanted to cut my workload down and just handle the bigger, 7, 8, 9-figure cases. So 2016, I went out on my own.
And that's when you started Skiver Law?
The Skiver Law Firm, yes.
The Skiver Law Firm. And then eventually you teamed up with some guy named Kellen, is that right?
Yes, Kellen Bradley, as you can see.
Hey, Skiver Bradley. I got it. And when did you guys team up?
So we had worked on some cases together before, and he had been at a couple different firms. And then when he was planning on leaving his firm, he reached out, and we figured it'd be a good time to get together and start working together on all our cases. So that was the beginning of this year of 2024, although I think this will be airing in 2025. So beginning of 2024 is when we first started.
They have to have pretty fast turnaround time because we're now, what is it, December 27th? We're broadcasting live from Cabo San Lucas, and you're in Arizona. So I doubt they're going to get this turned around in 2 days. So we're going to welcome the first program of 2025. Oops, sorry, that's the wind, see? Because I had the outdoors there. We got the outdoors at Cabo here. We just played a little pickleball, a little golf out here, but we had to do our one podcast with Ryan Skiver before the end of the year. And so that's your professional journey to where you're at right now. But you, like I said, as I mentioned earlier, out of all the people I know, have done more variety of education, searching for, because I've been on this journey now since the time I started, got my bar card. I started reading cross-examination, science and technique. I'd stop at the coffee shop every night, read for a couple hours. I reread the book a few times, and I know you've read that and done Dodd's training and a lot of stuff. So let's talk about, your journey. You started with the Reptile. Tell us about the Reptile journey.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, that first seminar that I went to with Don and David, the Welcome to the Revolution, I think it was, in like 2010. And I really liked it, made sense. And they had a deposition seminar coming up in LA in a few months. So I figured I would head over to LA and get a vacation out of it and learn some more. And we went to that. Charles Allen was the main guy who was Don's partner at the time. And he was talking about depositions and techniques, strategies. And then we split up into smaller groups. And I was lucky enough to have Satch Oliver as my instructor. And our group was probably like 8 to 10 lawyers. Most of them were 20, 30, 40 years in practice, who had a lot more experience than me. But they had all learned to start with the plaintiff. And so some of them were kind of struggling with the topics. But I was lucky that I learned, that approach with the defendant first, right from the start. So being the nerd that I am, I was kind of answering the questions that Satch was asking. And then he had to step outside for some reason for a little bit and asked me if I would run the group. I said, sure, happy to. He came back, we finished up, thought nothing of it. Then the next week I got a call from Don's office and they said, Don heard what you did. He wants to know if you want to handle any cases with him. So I said, yeah, of course, like all of my cases. And they said, well, pick 2 and send them over. So I sent over 2 cases. I think one was a med mal and the other was an armored truck case. And Don chose the armored truck case. So I, as a referring attorney with him, was able to go to his and David Ball's seminars, and they had them all across the country. So basically what I did was, like once a month or once every 2 months, I would fly all over the country to these seminars because I got in for free and just take in all the information I possibly could and then have fun in whatever city I was in. And so we did that for a while before they started Keenan Ball College. And then I was asked to be an instructor for that. And that was really helpful because the courses were broken down and the topics were safety rules, opening statement, deposition, things like that. And that transitioned at some point to Keenan Trial Institute. I was an instructor with that and learned all of those things firsthand from Don, which was amazing. He's a great mentor and was really helpful. I also read all of his blogs, and outside of that, there was a lot of other stuff that I was reading and learning at the time and kind of putting it together with that system that I was learning from Don.
Okay, so as far as the Reptile goes, so you said you started teaching with them or kind of traveling with them and working with Don. We all got to know what happened with your armored truck case. What happened when you had the great Don Keenan co-counsel your case? Tell us about what happened.
Sure. It's funny because I started with it, and the only training I'd really had was on smaller cases. So I was working it up the same way that I had learned for those smaller cases. And his partner came in and looked at it, and he says, "What the hell is this? This is shit." He's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't know." I'm trying to learn. That's why I'm here. And so his partner actually originally was like, how did you even get past me? He was like the gatekeeper. And I was like, told him how it happened. He's like, all right, well, I don't like this at all. This isn't a case we'd normally take. But I learned from Don and basically would do everything I possibly could to improve and make it better. And we had a very significant 7-figure result that was the biggest at my firm at that time. We settled 3 days before trial was going to start out here. And I love those clients there. I still talk to them all the time. They're some of my favorites. But I learned how to put together a trucking case and focus on systems failures instead of just treating it like a car accident, because truck crashes are not car accidents. So looking for the systems failure, putting it together, and getting the result that our clients deserved was fantastic. And I was hooked.
So how many years did you spend teaching with the Don Keenan and the Reptile, Keenan Trial College, whatever you want to call it?
So the first seminar was in 2010. I think Don and David started the Keenan Ball College in 2012. So I was one of the first instructors. And I taught through that into Keenan Trial Institute, and then was the trial dean, if you will. That's what they labeled the person that was in charge of the course. And then same thing for closing arguments, liability. I moved up to the graduate level and was teaching that. And all in all, I think it was approximately 12 years that I was teaching. And I think I taught more than any other instructor because I loved learning. I mean, I had students who were, 30 and 40 years practicing that had great results, and they would have stuff to teach the class as well. So I took all of that stuff from them and learned to look at a bunch of different types of cases and figure out how to frame them and put them together in the most effective way.
And so, other than Don Keenan and David Ball and the folks there, tell us about the other courses and classes, mentors that you've taken, kind of as best you can in the order you took them.
So Don Keenan obviously is my mentor. He's fantastic. I've learned a ton from him. And actually, one of my students in one of those courses became another mentor for me. His name is Jim Moriarty, and he's out of Houston, Texas. He had, I believe, the first $1 billion recovery in mass torts. And he was one of my students and really enjoyed when I was teaching and asked me if I wanted to work with him and handle his cases at trial for him. So I got him as a mentor in the mass torts arena and started working with him, and that was fantastic. As far as outside of the Keenan stuff, I know I'm going to leave a lot out here because every time I saw something, I would try to learn it or read it or whatever it might be. So books from Mo Levine on advocacy, Jerry Spence, Rick Friedman, Rules of the Road, Polarizing the Case. Other books outside of that, like Checklist Manifesto, Malcolm Gladwell's things like Blink, Tipping Point. His information is always helpful. Books on neuroscience like Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, I think is the way you pronounce his name. But then in addition to that, obviously, seminars and conferences. So like AZAJ had Don Bauermeister come and do a seminar. He was amazing.
Hold on a second. Let's talk about books. Okay, if you had to pick one book, so a trial lawyer listening to this, they say, okay, this is the one book that I say you got to read to get better at trial. What's the one book?
That's kind of a loaded question. If you say at trial, because...
No, to get better at the skills or craft of being a trial lawyer.
Okay. I mean, obviously, I have to go back to the Reptile because that was what started it all for me. It was a great foundation. So the only problem is the Reptile is like a little Post-it on a map of the world. They didn't put much information in there. There's so much more to learn outside of that, that even if you read the book, it doesn't really give you the Reptile information. So that was a great foundational book. But the Rules of the Road was really helpful to understand that. And then I started with missed cases too. So Polarizing the Case was huge. I thought that was great from Rick Friedman. Some of those other books like Mo Levine is really useful when you understand what you're looking for. The problem is when you read some of these things, you don't understand enough when you're reading them the first time. So as you go along in your career and you learn more things, you can read them again and you take a lot more from them. So that's what I would recommend is even the books you've read before, after you've been practicing for 5, 10, 15 years, go back and read them again because there's so much more information in there.
You mentioned the Arizona Association of Justice and Don Bauermeister. Because Don, I just got to know him because he came to Huntington Beach last year. I don't know if you saw him there or not. And he came by and visited our Huntington Beach conference. He's going to come teach this year in Huntington Beach. But what did you learn from Don?
Don's was really interesting. That was right at the beginning. And it's funny you say that about him being at Huntington was because that was how I was refreshed of who he was. And that's what made me look back through to figure out, the stuff that he talked about. Because it was like neuroscience and all of the ways that we make decisions and the fact that, it's based on emotion as opposed to logic. So that was really useful. And I loved his seminar that he gave.
Well, he'll be in our Huntington Beach conference this year is June 4th through 7th at the Paseo, and Don will be there. I think we're speaking for 3 hours. So he'll have quite a good chunk of information to share. Looking forward to that. So you said you were there last year. Speaking of Huntington Beach, I know that, you were at but what was your favorite things about the Huntington Beach conference of 2024? Because that was my favorite conference that I've ever attended, or, obviously I put it on. So I'm a little biased, but that one had everything for me. But what did you like best about it?
2024 was a lot of fun. That location, that hotel is amazing. The parties you throw are a blast. Maybe a little too much fun sometimes. And
that's crazy. That's blasphemous.
And the information is great too because you have so many options. And the fact that it's being recorded, you can watch it later, is nice because even though you may have some FOMO while you're there, you can always get caught up and find it later. But the best thing for me was actually sitting in on your presentation about the TLU boot camp with Joe Freed about presentation skills. I had been searching to find the best way to learn those presentation skills. I took like an acting class in college as like an extra course that you had to take or whatever. I thought that was fun. I did a play. But then I tried to find other places where I could get that same stuff. And I actually went to Jesse Wilson's Colorado workshop. It wasn't really what I was looking for as far as like presentation skills go. And I tried when I got back here also to find an acting coach, which was helpful. She really got me to explore some different things I hadn't thought about with voice control and tempo and pace and using your body along with the emotions that you're trying to convey. But then when I went to your seminar, your lecture at the 2024 Huntington Beach, it was exactly what I was looking for, essentially. So I talked to you and said, hey, I want to come out to a boot camp. And we just needed to find the time because obviously with a busy schedule and I have a 2-year-old at home now, had to try to work that in with a law firm and get out to Vegas, spend that time with you. But I'm so
And
glad.
your wife, don't forget, you had to work it in with your wife. That was,
Yes, of course.
here's
Well, that's part of the 2-year-old thing. Yeah, so I had to work the schedule with my wife and the 2-year-old and my partner, obviously, and get out there and work with you. It was great. It was exactly the stuff I was looking for the presentation skills that you can't really find anywhere else.
so the boot camp that Ryan did, it almost got canceled because there's only 3 students signed up. And I wanted to go to Satch Oliver's depositions, our trial thing that he's doing with John Romano, Connectionology. But I'm like, Skiver, we got to reschedule this. She's like, no way, man. This is the only time I can come. You got to do it. Da, 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 da. So we did. I'm really glad we did because it was super fun because it was like a really small class. I think it was like 4 or 5 students in the class. We had a great time. As far as, because we talk about presentation skills and talk a little bit more about that because to me, presentation, it's a skill and it's the most important skill that you have in the courtroom because everything, like all the strategy, the workup, the voir dire, the opening, the visual, that's all stuff done before the courtroom, getting prepared. But most people never actually practice or train the skills of presentation. And, like eye contact, learning how to make appropriate eye contact with a dozen people in 3 seconds and slowly ramp that up over, the voir dire over time and, training ourselves to make eye contact people before we start talking to them, pausing for a minute when we're done to break that eye contact. And, and also like glance control, drawing people's eyes to one side or the other, getting people to look where you want them to look is a skill. And it's a skill that needs to be practiced. You need to be, demonstrated, let the person try it, feedback, coaching, and, and video, and obviously all these skills, to me, it boggles my mind that somebody could try to train presentation skills without videotaping. So, and let's talk about that, the videotaping aspect. Prior to, my boot camp, how much had you videotaped yourself and broken down your presentation before?
Before that, I really hadn't, unless it was a situation where I was giving a speech or something like that. That would be the only time really where I would go back and look at my presentation skills because I could set up a camera and see what I was doing. And actually, as I'm watching you here, I don't have obviously the same skill on camera as you do because you're getting your hand movement in and I'm not getting that because of the level. And so I noticed that. It's moving with your voice, which is nice. But the practice with you and getting it on camera, when you go back and look at it, you start to realize all the issues that you have that you don't know that you have. I had caught some before from teaching in front of students and seeing what issues they had and correcting them. If, I got up there, would notice hands moving weird or playing in their pockets with change, that kind of thing. So I was always cognizant of that, but really sitting there with video recording and knowing what it's supposed to look like is really helpful because you can kind of internalize it too. really sticks in your mind a lot more, and you can run through those reps as well in your head better because you know what it's supposed to look like.
And when people do my class, a lot of times they're like, "Oh, this is like acting skills for trial lawyers," and I'm always like, "Bravo! They're acting skills. Trial is a performance, and it's a performance of persuasion. And like any actor, you have a stage left, you have stage right. You know what I mean? You have sort of like whatever you would call that third wall if you're trying to create an illusion. You know what I mean? Trying to create space because one of the most important things I think that we talk about and teach is the creation of space. That whenever there's a verb in a story, there has to be action. And if there's action, that action has to take place somewhere, and a place is a space. So if you have a verb, you automatically should know that you should be creating space. You should be creating an illusion. So because to me, the great skill of a trial lawyer is to transport the audience, to transport the jury from that little space inside that courtroom, to take them back in time and make them witnesses to the events that brought us here. So that way they experience it viscerally. And I said, I've heard you can't transport somebody else until you can transport yourself, which is basically putting yourself into that kind of story trance, and to create because like Dave Clark, who you met, at my place, and he's my mentor. I remember him telling me when we were out back in 2012, I think it was, we were in Des Moines, Iowa, watching Spence's last trial. That's where I met him. And I demonstrated my presumption of innocence voir dire. And he's like, "Does that shit work for you?" I'm like, "Dude, I've only lost 2 out of the last 100 trials. I think it's working." He's like, "Any idea why it works?" I'm like, "You got me. How the fuck do I know?" And he's like, when you can make the unconscious conscious, you're going to be dangerous. In the civil world, we call that rich. And of course, I'm like a public, I'm a criminal defense lawyer, but basically getting paid less than a public defender because public defenders got a guaranteed paycheck. And as a criminal defense lawyer representing a lot of indigent people, you didn't have any guaranteed paychecks. But of course, like, I'd like to be rich, but like, I didn't really, comprehend what he meant by that at that moment. But obviously, in course of training and time afterwards, it does make sense because, when you can, like when people, like we're all great storytellers when it's our own story. The skill of a trial lawyer is to become a great storyteller when it's somebody else's story. That's the big skill. And to combine the skills of eye contact, emotional state control. So when you say good morning to everybody, you have like a warm face, like the same warm face you would have when you see a friend that you know and like, and it's like, "Hey, Ryan, what's going on?" But it's that same face though. So that to the unconscious mind, it's like, "Oh, we must be old friends if you're looking at me like that," right? And the ability to, like use our hands effectively, because we can only connect with one person at a time. Like, obviously we should only use one hand to keep that one hand between ourselves and the person we're connecting with. And if we train ourselves to move our hand with the rhythm of our voice, that it seems so obvious, and it is once you do it, but until you learn it, until you see it, it's like you'll sit there with 2 hands, you know what I mean? Like most lawyers jerking by their sides, and it's like you just see it all the time on, and like glance control, when people use a demonstrative, yet, if I want to show you my slim pop, but I look back at you to see if you're looking, of course you're looking at my eyes and nobody's looking at my visuals anymore. But just these basic things, like my friend Dave Christensen, he's like just slowing down and making eye contact before you start talking, just those 2 little things right there. Forget about the rest of the skills, because you can only learn these skills. I mean, you got to learn them over time. You got to practice them, but you just learn a little bit. You practice every day, which is the key part, is practicing, the skills with every person. But it's such a great thing because every person we meet, we get a chance to connect with. And if we connect with them, it's much more likely they're going to do what we ask them to do than if they just think we're, ordering or bossing them around. I mean, just, and connection's life. I love when people do my boot camp. They're like, "Wow, these skills are they're more valuable than just a courtroom. Like, my wife and I are getting along better than ever. It's like, I'm listening to her. I'm like, it's amazing, huh? It's good stuff. Got to keep it up."
And so you have to practice in the deposition. You practice in motion hearings. You practice at the grocery store. That's why you have a family. You practice on them. You have to keep the skill up or it erodes. It's simple as that.
Somebody give us an overview of this case.
Or I call wowing it. And what I mean by wisdom of the wise is Why are we still right in spite of this fact?
These are just some of the clips when I was cross-examined 10 years ago, remember that.
About 11 o'clock at night, and he leaves this message. I got a brilliant idea. Every conversation he starts, I have a brilliant idea.
But welcome, everybody. We've got a good crowd here today.
So Ryan, you just completed the TLU Skills Bootcamp back in November because your lovely wife finally gave you a hall pass, and I guess your 2-year-old also had to give you a hall pass to come to it. And the skills that we learned and we practice, for presentation and connection, of course, the key ones are, of course, are eye contact, emotional state control, voice control, hand movement, glance control, creating space. Those are really the key areas that we really dig into. So tell us, what did you learn about eye contact, or I guess maybe not just learn, but also kind of maybe reinforced?
Sure. Eye contact obviously is very important for making a connection with your jurors. You don't want to creep them out with looking at them too long, but you want to make sure that you give them respect of looking them in the eye before you start speaking. And if you have a panel of 12, 14 potential jurors, you can briefly make eye contact with each of them in about a 3-second time frame. And as you go throughout your case, you want to kind of ramp up your eye contact with your jurors to really make that connection stronger and make sure that they feel important as you're delivering the information to them.
Yeah, and so if we first stand up, I call it like micro connecting, so that we can look at like 12 people in less than 3 seconds. And so the idea is to get people comfortable looking us in the eyes, because typically people are not. If you walk down the street, look at somebody, look away immediately like that, right? And so these people, we need them to look us in the eyes. We need to, them want to connect with us. And I think by getting them comfortable just a little bit at a time, and then ramping it up really helps a lot, in that regard. Speaking of eye contact, that's also kind of like, kind of segues right into glance control. And so tell us, what did you learn about that?
The glance control is kind of using that connection that you have with them, with your eyes, to get them to look where you want, which is obviously important because you have demonstratives or other visuals. So you want to make sure that you make the connection with them and draw their eyes towards whatever you want them to be looking at. If you look back at them while they're supposed to be looking at something, it's confusing for them, and it may break that connection. So it's important to control where you're looking so that you can help to make it easier for them to know where they should be looking.
Right. When you say, well, if you look back at, if you're using a visual, and you went, if I was using this visual, I wanted to look at Travelers University on my mug here. I have to look at it. As soon as I look back to see if you're looking by natural default, as human beings, we look at people in the eye who are looking at us. So now everybody looks at me instead of looking at my visual. And it loses its effectiveness because you're trying to create a group experience and to keep the group focused and have all eyes move and focus simultaneously. And part of that too is if we want to look at something from the right, we start over to the juror on the far left and kind of move across and micro connect their eyes from left to right. And then we get over to our right, kind of drags them by their eyes over to this visual, or if we want to create space, to our right or to our left, create the illusion, then that I think is a helpful technique. And speaking of creating space, I know this was a bigger thing for you, to figure out, was the creating space or creating an illusion. So tell us what you learned about that.
Yeah, the creating space I had always kind of been looking for. It's a great way to tell stories because you can essentially take your jurors into the space where it happened so they can kind of be witnesses to what occurred. So, when you're talking about a story, obviously it takes place in a space. And so you want to take them to that space so they can experience it as well. So you transport them essentially by the way that you communicate. And if you have action, then you need action within that same space. So it's important to make sure you don't break that illusion, because if you go back and make eye contact with them while you're supposed to be in that space, then it really kind of, it breaks up the illusion of the story that you're telling.
Right. And so I kind of look at creating spaces. It's kind of similar to when people tell stories from we tell stories from our own lives.
we all create space because we're not working on eye time. We're focusing on the image in our mind. And the only time we ever come back and look at people when we're actually telling stories from our lives is just to check in and make sure that they're following the story, that their emotional state matches the story we're telling. If not, then we're like, are you following me? But if they are, we can tell by their face, right? And so creating space is really about making the unconscious conscious, because that's what, Clark really taught me all those years ago, when we were at Spence's last trial. And it took time for me to process what that meant. But like unconsciously, we're all great storytellers. Unconsciously, our hands move at perfect timing with our stories. Our facial expressions change perfectly with our stories because they're our stories. But when we tell a trial story, it ain't our story. So, but if we create space and we do it really well, it makes it look like it's our own story. It makes it feel like it's our own story. And what it does, it allows us, if we do it really well, it allows us to transport into the story, to almost relive it in front of the jury. And then if we can transport ourselves into the story, then naturally we can transport the audience or the jury so they not just hear, but they actually experience or become witnesses to the events that led us here. And if they experience it, they can't be talked out of it. And that's why it's such an important skill to master. And you see the great trial lawyers doing it. It's like the narrative, like the further we can get away from the narrative, generally the better we're going to be when it comes to telling the stories of the case. Voice control. What did you learn about, work with your voice? Because one thing I do remember about you, because I saw you speak one time at ATAA, is that you spoke a little too, much too rapidly. Now you tried to give me an excuse, you had so much content, but it's never an excuse to, no matter how much time they give you, always got to slow down. But tell us what you learned about voice control.
The speed is what you're talking about, obviously was an issue for me. Trying to make sure that I slow down and give breaks because the brain needs time to process information, especially for the jurors. They don't know the story of the case, and so you need to give them time with pauses to kind of process it and make sure that they can make it more of a memory in their mind. Because if you give too much information too quickly, then it's very hard to actually process that information. That's why taking breaths at certain times is important, slowing down the speed at which you deliver. And then also another thing that goes hand in hand with that, is your use of your hands to make sure that you are connecting and drawing them in. So you want to make sure that you're using your hands, a few inches below your chin so that you're helping to make that connection as you're speaking with your jurors and bringing them in to that communication.
Right. Well, the voice also, though, the pauses are really important to train ourselves to slow down, pause, but also to breathe when we pause. Because I see from training so many people, they get tense and they don't breathe. It forces them to speed up because they're trying to get all the words out before they run out of air. So that's really important. And also the pause allows people to process the information and, and give images or illusions to the words that we're using. So that way it's a picture, it's memorable to them now, and they can recall it. And that's that's why it's just so important. And as we get stressed, and it's stressful standing up in front of people and presenting and performing, it tends to make everybody speed up. And the only way that you will slow down is if you train before you get there. If you train for the anxiety and the pressure of the event, and that you're conscious, and that you train all these things, because you have to train all these skills so they become part of your unconscious. So that way, none of your bandwidth is being used up on these mechanics because you can't. It's like thinking about how to shape your hands to catch a ball that's coming at you. If you try to think about what your hands should look like, you have no chance of catching it. But you know how to catch it because you caught thousands of balls, and your hands know what to do when the ball's coming in and to close around it if it's a football or whatever. So it's that time, and it's that practice of all these skills working together. And then you brought up the use of the hands, and that one is key because so many people, the hands tell so much about a person. You can see from the training, especially when you videotape and you slow it down, you can see people's hands stiff as like karate choppers, or they do these weird things, or they just crunch up like fists, or you see them grabbing onto their thigh when they put their hand down. It's the most fascinating thing to see it. But if people's hands are relaxed, it causes their whole body to relax. I heard somebody say one time, for an actor, if they just relax their tongue, it causes their whole body to relax. I would agree, but if you relax, but I can't see somebody's tongue. And so, whereas if I see their hands are relaxed, they're relaxed because the whole idea is connection. And we cannot connect with another human being if we're tense. It's not possible. But with the people, the most relaxed person, like you watch somebody like, a Nick Rowley or a Brian Panish up there, totally different styles, but they're so relaxed. It's like they're in their living rooms, not that they're in a courtroom. And that's where we need to get to that level of comfort, relaxation. But that's what the practice does. And that's what, practicing these skills over and over does. And it's amazing to think about, because I've done this program now for roughly just 3 years. I started December of 2021. And obviously it's similar but different than it used to be. But it's amazing. Like I can see myself getting better at presenting every program, just the little nuances of the just these skills, just practicing over and over. And people are like, how many times do you think you've done these same scripts? I'm like, thousands? I have no idea. But it's like, I know that every time I do it, every rep, I'm getting better. Every rep. It's like anything else. It's like the difference between Michael Jordan and everybody, or, Kobe Bryant, or it's the reps, it's the training. It's the training. It's all about the training. It's, and it's like Giorgio said that, or brought up the point that, the reason athletes are performing at a much higher level today is not that we're evolved or so much genetically stronger than we were 20 years ago. It's because the improvement of the training process. Of now training has become more of a professionalized endeavor. So they're actual trainers who focus on, okay, this is the training process. Let's look at what works and gets the greatest results as quickly as possible, and what's not working, and cut all that shit out. Because the truth is, if you're training and you're putting time in and focus, as a human being, we need to see results. We need to see progress because it's hard. It takes discipline to train. It's like going on a diet. You know what I mean? People try to get in shape. They don't see anything for like a month and they quit because they can't see anything. But if they stay for the 2 months, now they start to see a whole new body shape, a whole new level of energy and fitness. Like, oh, this is great. Now they got momentum. But it's getting past those sticking points and just keep pushing ourselves to practice. And speaking of that, what are you doing to continue to practice and train? Really specific. I know you've done a lot, but you read and you do this, but to practice these skills and train these skills so that when trial time is ready, you are comfortable. You're not thinking about how to move your hands or control your voice. You're dialed in.
It's interesting, like you were just talking about with sports, you're looking for that muscle memory. And that's really what we're trying to do here. When I was younger, I put in hours and hours of practice shooting threes, making sure I got my form right so that I didn't have to think about it. So it was unconscious. And that's the same kind of thing here with the presentation skills, is taking that time and making sure that you do it over and over so it becomes unconscious. Like you said, when you stand up in trial, you have those tools at your disposal without really having to use the bandwidth to make sure that you're doing those things. So I have, like you called it, a dojo set up in my office, which has the boards of the fake jurors, which is nice because you have somebody to look at and make eye contact with for the micro connections and things like that. And I have that set up so I can practice each morning when I get into the office, put in a half hour or an hour or work on certain segments and make sure I'm video recording it so I can go back and look at it. Because that really makes a huge difference. When you can see those things, it makes it more obvious to you the mistakes you're making so you can correct them the next time, so that you hopefully make fewer and fewer mistakes. And I'm actually starting a practice group here in Phoenix, Arizona. For those that are interested, feel free to reach out to me. My cell phone number is 480-239-3633. And my email is rskiver@skiverbradley.com. Get a hold of me. We're going to start a group and work on all these skills together, because the more people you have in your group working and seeing these things to help improve the others, the better.
And the time to start training is now, because my friend Shemek Lubecki and Dave Sugden did a presentation at TLU Vegas on performance. And Shemek really talked about, because he's like a high performance, it was almost an Olympic boxer. I think he was like a high level boxer. I don't think he quit. He didn't make it to the Olympics, but trained a lot. And also he's a competitive shooter, right? And he talks about taking dry reps when he travels, he brings like a fake gun with him so he can practice his muscle movement shooting every day, really. It's
Yeah.
like you got to keep practicing. But he talks about the three spheres of performance, and one is the conscious mind, and that's the intentional stuff that we're doing, like which we write out our opening, we write out our questions, we write out our voir dire, we decide what visuals to use, we decide how to sequence the information. That's all the conscious mind. That's one sphere of performance. But the other sphere, of course, is the unconscious mind, and that's where our training comes in, because when it's performance time, there's not enough, nobody has enough bandwidth to control the unconscious and the conscious simultaneously. So that's where all the training comes in, is because performance is the unconscious mind. Skills are unconscious. They're part of who we are. They come from our training. And then, of course, the third aspect of it is the self-image, which is, confidence. And that's so important. That's why people say, oh, I'm just going to go try this shitty case to get reps. I'm like, be careful, because you can only get beat down so many times before it's going to break your little spirit. And how many times is different for every person. But we all know people that had 1 or 2, 3, 4 bad licks, and they don't go to that courtroom anymore because they're like, fuck it. It's too expensive. It's too humiliating. It's humiliating to get defensed. I don't care what people say. It's public rejection. All your hard work, nobody listened to you. You're a big liar. The story you told is bullshit, right? That's what the jury's telling you, bullshit. And it's humiliating. And so that's why it's important to, not get stuck in shitty cases with, shitty clients, and, and be selective, right? Go put all that hard work in, all those long hours in a case that's really worthwhile, that you're not just there because you want to stand up in front of a group, because standing up in front of a group and, getting shellacked, it's not that beneficial. I don't care what people say. It's just not that beneficial. Anyways.
The highlight of TLU for me was having the opportunity to network with attorneys from out of state.
TLU has been amazing. I'm so glad I came. It was one of the most inspiring events I've been to. Great networking, great food. It's been amazing. I can't wait for next year.
For the dark arts for a day to hang out with Clark. So tell us about your Clark experience.
Yeah, he's a really interesting guy. He's amazing with the framing and addressing issues in voir dire that may come up in your case. I thought it was really interesting. I wish I would have had more time, and I'm looking forward to the next chance I get to spend time with him.
Well, that'll be May 31st through June 3rd, because we're going to do a 4-day. I think we might do one before that. I have to look at my schedule, but we're definitely doing those 4 days in June before Huntington Beach, because that's what we did in Vegas before the TLU Vegas, and it was super fun. And for those students that did it, they had like an 8-day trial college, so they got to learn the presentation skills and the framing with Clark, and presentation skills from me and Giorgio. But then you got to do the 4 days of the conference. Is kind of what we're going to do in Huntington Beach this year. We did that last year too, so it's pretty fun, and you really get to learn a lot. And you're in like Huntington Beach for 8 days. I mean, you can't beat that. I don't think. It's. I mean, we're working on beating that, but it's pretty great. It's pretty great. So besides the stuff we talked about, tell us about some other. I know you did Roger Dodd. Tell us about that.
I did. I kind of squeezed in Roger Dodd's cross-examination with his son. They had a course in Hawaii. So I got my wife to do our baby moon in Hawaii, while I was able to also sneak in the course and go to that during the day. She said she wasn't going to allow that anymore because I was spending too much time in the course, but it worked that one time, and it was really useful. The techniques of looping and the one fact per question, or really kind of dialing it in or focusing it in, was helpful. I liked working with those guys a lot.
Yeah, Roger's great. The son's great. They come out and taught before. I almost did his workshop myself. It was scheduled for Montana, Big Sky, but it was just in the days when COVID was ending, and Roger was like, COVID's too wild. I can't go out then. So I ended up canceling it. But it worked out great because that turned into like the ski boot camp that we do, every year in Tahoe. And this year it's February 1st through 8th. And there's still one spot left for ski boot camp. And, ski boot camp, that's my favorite because we have these 2 houses rented out on Lake Tahoe because there's like 2 groups, because there's just too many, because there's only about 10 students, but still everybody's got to everybody's got to have their own room. You know what I mean? It can't be like the ranch. We're all going to share rooms, for God's sake. Everybody's got to have their own room, but I'm super looking forward to, the boot camp there. But, because like because like with Roger's cross though, because I really love his book, Cross-Examination Science Technique. I've read it quite a few times, but like what we teach in cross, I think is like the cross-examination stuff of the defense medical expert. I really think that was some of the best stuff, because Craig Peters came up with that, because he came out to my place for a weekend. Because like the skills I think are important, not just leading questions only and one new fact per question, but cross-examining in the present tense, I think is critical, because it forces you, the questioner, to visualize it, forces the witness to visualize it, but more importantly, allows the jury to actually visualize what you're talking about. And then, looping, you talked about looping, but that's very important, but people won't loop naturally. You have to like write in your loops. And then effectively using a flip chart to anchor your bullet points and putting one topic per page and writing legibly is a skill. Being conscientious of your emotional state while you're crossing. So many people get so aggressive in cross. When it's foundational, it looks weird, when you just set the guy up. Using our hands to control the pace of the witness's answers. Training ourselves pacing-wise when we're asking questions, because a lot of people get all amped up on cross-examination and speak too rapidly and slur their words together and don't enunciate clearly. There's another, skill. Oh, another skill, dropping all the filler words like and, so, okay. That takes practice and skill. Dropping or even delaying the taglines like right, correct, isn't true. Like, doctor, you're board certified. True. So even if the guy doesn't answer right there, having that little space, let your answer linger, I think is just so effective, because we trade it in context of the defense medical exam, which is the right way to do a medical evaluation versus the wrong way in the risk. Because I think it's a very effective cross for drawing a line in the sand too. So I just shot it. So I'm working with Panish, because Panish has got a big trial coming up. And so we're doing this 10-minute Zoom every day where he's like kind of going through what he's doing to prepare. So I shot him. I said, so he's working on this big expert cross. So I shot him this outline. He's like, I'll work it in. I'm like, do that, Brian. I'm like, send me the transcripts. That way, because he's like, that's his, because he's really great at cross. Like that guy, he's like, I'm going to destroy this witness. I'm like, I can't wait to read the transcript. But so those are skills I think are real important to develop. And, most people won't develop them unless you train them. But if you train and practice just this 1 5-minute script, you'll get, I think, so much better at cross. Because you did my little bit of cross, you needed Dodd. So how would you kind of just, compare them or like contrast them and stuff like that?
I did. Actually, that's what I was going to comment on. I really liked your use of visuals. That was one of the things I was hoping for a little bit more with Dodd, and maybe it's because we were in Hawaii or something. It wasn't as much the presentation or application of that stuff as it was the listening and, giving back to them what they gave you kind of thing, and making sure that you're telling a coherent story that you want. But I loved yours because of the presentation skills that were built into it. Like you talked about with the glance control earlier, you do a great job of making sure that you have the jury looking where you want them, at your butcher paper or whatever it might be. And even the use of your hands too, to control the witness. I thought that was brilliant. And I really liked the way you put that together in just that short sequence, because you can use that knowledge of those skills in other parts of cross-examination. You just have to think about it. Now that you have that as kind of a base skill, it makes it easier. And some of the other skills from the presentation boot camp that I really liked that you talked about were the use of space. I actually have been trying to find that. I'd heard people use it or talk about it or present it, and it may have been you at one point, but I couldn't remember where I had seen it. And I had been searching, in all of my studying to try to find it. So when I realized it was you, I was extremely excited about that. And you helped me a lot to understand that, the movement with the verbs and things like that, where you're keeping that illusion of a space going. So I was excited to have that as part of it, in addition to your witness prep, which I know you hadn't done witness prep in a while, but you actually did a little bit for us. And it was great to see that. And I want to learn more, honestly.
Yeah, I'm doing this DeRobertis boot camp starting January 8th, but I'm going to do an extra half day at the beginning just on witness prep and direct, because there's so many skills to learn as a trial lawyer. You can't possibly, a 4-day program. It's a great start, but it's just really to get familiar with the skills so that you continue to practice them.
It's like a golf lesson. You take that golf lesson, but then if you're going to be good, you got to go out there every day and hit balls for an hour and try to, replicate in your mind, what it is you're supposed to be doing. But, because like for the skills that we're trying to teach in trial lawyering here, I read these 3 books that had a big impact on my philosophy and teaching. And the first one was The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, because he was both the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer was written about him. And he was also a world champion in martial arts. And so he said, I'm not a great athlete, and I'm not brilliant, but I'm a great student. So it's all about how we learn as human beings. And that's where I really got the idea of videotaping. And so because he said you can only get to like the epiphany, that next level of insight, like you only go one level higher than you're currently at. But by recording it, you're documenting it. So you're kind of building upon the knowledge. So that way you can have these quote unquote flashes of brilliance or whatever you want to call it. And so that one had a big impact on me. And then this book, Peak, The Science of High Performance by Anders Ericsson, that's all about, purposeful practice and deliberate practice. And, because anytime you try to learn something, you're applying deliberate practice, right? Like golf, you got to learn the foundations, how to hold the club, how to stand. And then you got to get an accurate mental representation of what a swing looks like. And then you got to practice it. And then you got to have a coach. And then you got to get feedback. And you got to actually go out there and try to hit balls on an actual, from the driving range to the actual tee box on the course, and constantly challenge yourself and push the challenge. And when you're learning to really focus, because you can't like try to learn these skills while you have, something else going in the background. It takes extreme focus, to learn these skills of being a trial lawyer. And then finally, the last one I've really listened a lot to and read repeatedly is the Talent Code. Because the great news, everybody, is there's no such thing as talent. There are no naturals. Brian Panish, Nick Rowley, Keith Mitnick, every one of them, they work their way to where they're at. And if anybody wants to be great, it's the greatest time in the world to be a trial lawyer, because everything is here for you. All the, the skills you can learn at, my boot camp, you can learn with Roger Dodd or with Jesse Wilson or wherever it is you decide the person's teaching the stuff that you connect to. And then the strategy and the theory, it's like you got people teaching the best stuff ever. And like you said, so much is on TLU On Demand. It's crazy. 4 years of conferences, over almost 400 webinars, like just so much to gather. But we didn't finish with you though, Ryan, on your journey, your journey of knowledge. Because I know you also did some work in psychodrama in the Trial Lawyers College. So tell us about, because I spent 12 years there myself. It was fun. I made lots of friends, but I cannot say I'm a big fan of their methodology or the people they choose to sue, like me. But go on. No hard feelings, of course.
No, I'm always looking for all of the different options, really. I want to have 3 to 5 different ways to do any one thing in case the judge shuts me down or I don't think something's going to apply to a certain case or a certain trial. So that's why I try to learn from as many people as I possibly can, because everybody knows something that I don't. So I kind of just, follow that journey. And one of the things was Trial Lawyers College and doing just like a weekend thing, but it was psychodrama, which I found to be really interesting. And we got into stuff like role playing. And the main thing that I really took away though was the listening. There was some good listening exercises where you make sure that you're really listening to understand where the person is coming from. So I found that to be really helpful. But then also in the psychodrama, doing kind of the role reversal and looking at it from the other side. And I think we all do that anyways when we're, writing a direct or a cross-examination. You have to think about, what are they thinking? What's their response going to be? And how do I deal with it? So it was kind of a useful tactic that I enjoyed. I didn't go too much further. I think we did one cross-examination course also that was like telling your story, discovering your story, something along those lines. But I never went to the actual 3-week thing at the ranch.
That was smart of you, buddy. Save 3 weeks of your life. Unless you're going for vacation, then you missed out on a 3-week vacation with some really great people. But what's Clark say? It's like discovering the story. He goes, there's only one story, the betrayal story. That's it. There's no discovering the story. Just what's the betrayal story? And I do think psychodrama is useful for about 2 days. And after that, like, it used to drive me honestly crazy because I went there for 12 years in a row. And like all the time, the same people would come back, and like we'd be in like the middle of a skills thing, and then somebody would like have some emotional breakdown. Okay, now we can spend 3.5 hours dealing with so and so's problems. I'm like, I don't want to be, crass, but I feel like you don't give a shit about that guy's problems. I came here to get better. I'm not here to be everybody's therapist, but that was the place, that was it at the time. So it was what it was at the time. But you also have, gone to, so I know you went to Trial by Human. Did you do Trial by Human with Nick Rowley? I did that, one of those classes. Nick's a great guide.
Yeah,
Oh.
Actually, he wasn't at that one when I was there. I think I was only able to make it for a portion of it because I was flying out. But Jacob Norman was there. He was great. Worked with him. They were in Phoenix, and we were doing stuff with voir dire, which was really helpful. Obviously, his brutal honesty stuff is fantastic, and everybody should be using it. So I had used that as a segment of my voir dire before jury selection. So I wanted to go out there and get kind of the firsthand experience with it. So I did some work there too.
It's funny because Nick was actually the reason how I got to California, because we were roommates at the Trial Lawyers College. So you see something real positive came out of it, because I'm sitting here in Cabo right now, and I probably would be here, but for the Trial Lawyers College and Nick Rowley getting me started on this path. Oh, and then Jacob Norman used to run, when I used to teach another program called Trojan Horse Method. Jacob was actually the one that gave me the idea to start the Trojan Horse Method, because I was complaining about the Trial Lawyers College and stuff that I disagreed with. And we were in Wyoming, and we were climbing up the mountain there in Wyoming in Jackson Hole. And he's like, Dan, you're a big complainer. You're very critical. He's like, if you think you're so smart, you should start your own program and then see if anybody shows up for it. I'm like, I'll do it. If you insist I must do it, I will do it. Plus, they would never make me an instructor there for whatever reason. Apparently, I have an abrasive personality. What can I say? But
I think you're just a different style of coach. I had a
that's true.
I had a coach like you in high school basketball. He was like the winningest coach in high school basketball in Ohio, like 400 wins or something. But he was more of the Bobby Knight mentality. So some people learn that way, and some people learn other ways. So I think it's nice to have both approaches, because some people do like that hard love. I think you were talking about one of the other guys who was a wrestler before. And I think that's the way he was used to being coached, was, just kind of really, you got to get this, that kind of thing. That's what I would say about your coaching mentality, is I've experienced it before. And so it wasn't anything new for me at the boot camp.
Right. I'm just here for one thing: get results. I'm not here to make people feel good about themselves. There's nothing to feel good. Some of the presentations I got to watch, there's nothing to feel good about. The only thing good to feel good about is you're not doing it in the courtroom. You're doing it right here in the dojo. We're going to fix. It's like this intervention is going to take place right now. We're gonna get rid of some of these bad habits like real fast, because you cannot go on with the rest of your life with these kinds of weird idiosyncrasies, whatever you're gonna call them. Like, don't be yourself. Don't be yourself. Be somebody that's calm, relaxed, and confident, not the shaky, insecure, stuttering person that we are. Because dude, I know what it's like. Okay, it took me like 6 months to stop stuttering in the courtroom when I was a young lawyer. I was terrified. We're all terrified. This is our natural state of fear. And the only way around it is to train, is to practice, is to, on TLU On Demand, there's a great program with Shemnath Becky and David Sugden. And David does some defense work too, but he really made these videos on, and this training series on evidentiary foundations and objections, which is so critical, especially for every lawyer, but especially for the young lawyer, because you're not going to get any benefit of the doubt as a young lawyer. So you better know your rules and your procedure like the back of your hand, or you're going to get smoked, even if you're right. If you speak and any stutter or insecurity comes out of your voice, chances of you getting a really good young lawyer go way down.
It's kind of like the bar exam on your feet. You got to remember all those evidence issues with a judge and a jury looking at you, while you may have a defense counsel, with 40 years of experience, and you're like, oh shit, what did I say? What was the question? How do I respond to this? So having that laid out to be able to learn, I'm actually going to go check that out now. I think I know it pretty well after all my years, but it never hurts to learn more and kind of refresh that stuff and practice.
Oh yeah, no, we're going to do I think 2-day boot camp we're going to put together on just practicing foundation, practicing objections. This is my year to become like the top trial lawyer. That's why I'm not doing a fall program. we're gonna crush Huntington Beach. It's gonna be amazing. I bet we'll probably have 700 or 800 people there because last year we had 600, and it's like the best program because we buy out the whole hotel on the beach, the Paseo. First of all, every room has an ocean view and a balcony. Um, then on top of that, we got 4 lecture tracks, 8 workshop tracks with the top trial lawyers. It's 4 days. Wednesday is just workshops, and there'll probably be a couple pre-conference activities like we did in Vegas. Like I think my friend Ted Wacker's kind of putting together a golf outing, and there might be some other things that are social. But there's definitely gonna be like 8 workshops on Wednesday, June 4th. For people that want to come in a little bit early, and then as far as the rest of it goes, it's got great food. We do a full breakfast for everybody every day, a full lunch for everybody every day. So that does really great for getting to know people and the networking. And it's like an indoor outdoor program. So much of it's outside on the ocean lawn with a nice beautiful view of the Pacific and the breeze. And it's the perfect time of year because it's overcast. And so it's not sunny most of the time. So it's not hot. It's like mid 60s, low 70s every day. And what else is fantastic about? Oh, we have theme parties every night with live music, and I work on having karaoke every night because I am a participant and I like to karaoke. The people, why do you have karaoke every night? I'm like, because I organize this and I love to karaoke and it gets people up there and it's fun. And then after our theme parties every night from 5:30 to 8:30, we have the lobby lounge where we have a DJ and we have an open bar and ping pong tables and foosball, and I think we're going to have air hockey and pool up this year too. And then on top of that, though, during the parties, we got food trucks. So we have tons of unlimited food. It's like once you get there, you're pretty much taken care of the whole time. You don't have to really, if you don't want to. But then people organize nice dinners and stuff and take people out to dinner. And it's like, to me, it's like the best because the whole idea is to make more money, right? That's the whole idea. But if we can make more money and have fun, and we can make more money, and because we make more money by learning more, by getting great education, so we do better in our cases, but also by networking, right? Because we all want referrals, because who doesn't want a good case to work on, right? And if you send a referral out, hopefully you want to get paid because we are in business, and the chances of that go way up when you have a huge network. So that's why Huntington Beach is going to be freaking awesome, and I can't wait.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say is get your rooms early at Paseo because that place is awesome. And in 2023, I waited too long. So I actually had to stay at a hotel like next door or down the street. So I had to walk over and back every night. I didn't make that mistake in 2024 and got a great room at Paseo. So the sooner you can get the room, the better. He releases the blocks early. I highly recommend locking one down.
No, it's like the registration's open and it's cooking, and it's like my goal is to build the best programs and get the best trial lawyers coming, and we got lots of new folks coming and a lot of our old steadfast ones, and we're putting the agenda together, and it's coming along pretty great. But you also, where else did you go? I know you've been to Lanier Trial College at least once.
Yes, twice actually.
See that? Twice.
Yeah.
So tell us about what you got from that.
It was really interesting. Obviously, he is a great presenter because he is a preacher or pastor or something like that. So he practices.
He gets to practice a few hours a week, and he actually prepares and does his multimedia. So that's a lot of good. And I'm sure he has a coach. There's no way this guy doesn't have a coach because he's a very good presenter. He's the best presenter of trial lawyers that I'm aware of. But
he's fantastic. And like you were saying, the presentation that he has, like the PowerPoints that he puts together, I think he worked with Cliff Atkinson with a bunch of that stuff. And I did a course with him about beyond bullet points, I think, or something like that for PowerPoint. And taking away the demonstratives from Lanier, I used some in a trial before, actually a couple trials. I also really enjoyed the neuroscience stuff that he had in there and talking to different jurors, because obviously we have, millennials and, people in their 80s, whatever it might be, all the way through. So you've got conservatives, you've got liberals, you've got all along the spectrum. You need to be able to talk to everybody, depending on where you're trying cases and who you have as a jury. So I thought that information was really useful, and he kind of got me more into demonstratives. I had watched an online webinar with him, and kind of the toys he pulled out and the way he explained things so simply with different tools or toys or whatever it was. I love that. So I've always been looking for those things too. to explain to a jury and make it memorable and easy to understand.
Somebody that I have a lot of respect for that went to his programs said that they liked it, but thought it was a bit, too theoretical because he's trying to appeal to the mass tort lawyer, the personal injury lawyer, the car wreck lawyer, the trucking lawyer, the civil rights lawyer, the employment lawyer. Because it has to be so generalized to be a universal philosophy that it doesn't really give concrete exemplars. What do you think about that? What do you think about that?
So I think because it is more universal, I think you can use it, the different techniques, and apply it to your cases. It's not very case specific though, like you're talking about, where you'd say, oh, that definitely applies to this case. But one of the things that he did that I loved was those roadmaps and using.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the
roadmaps are great.
Yeah. The IPVO cameras, using that during deposition and or at trial. So I actually tried making some of those roadmaps for this last trial, which was fun and makes it interesting as you're going through trial. That I enjoy taking away. And then he had the skeleton with like the red tape and the red tissue paper and things like that to really show the injuries. And one of our trials, the judge wouldn't let us use the medical provider as an expert because prior counsel hadn't disclosed him properly. And once we got brought into the case, we had to do what we could. So we actually used that skeleton for what the doctor saw and felt on the plaintiff to help establish the injuries and do it through essentially a fact witness. So I loved that and was able to apply that shortly after going to Linear Trial Academy.
Yeah, no, I go every year and I see it a little bit and like all those different personality types. I'm like, wow, you gotta be really smart to be able to talk to these people. I'm like, I can't remember anything about these people. This is going right past, this is right over my head. I'm like, I'm trying to remember the person's name and a couple of things they said. I can't worry about these personality types, but I guess if you're really smart, then some of the stuff you have to be really smart for the stuff to really be beneficial. That's why a lot of it just went past me. So
I think going year after year too, it kind of adds on it. And if you've learned some of those things before, or you take away things that you're like, I can use this. You may not be able to use all of it, but you say, and that's one of the things I always look for. Is there at least one thing I can take away from whoever this speaker is that I can apply in the future?
Yeah, I really love going to that conference because, people there really want to get better. They're really focused. I mean, they're barely ever out in the exhibit hall because they're all in there taking class the whole time. The guys didn't take any breaks. I'm like, does this guy breathe? I mean, we throw a great party every year at I think it's Vic and Steph's Steakhouse or something. Yeah. We do it like on the last night. So we're good for the social part of it.
Yes.
The social part of it is pretty cool. So Ryan, what would you say in your career is your most proud thing you're professionally that you've accomplished, where you're like, this is my, for me, it would be TLU. That's my thing right now. That's somebody said, what's the most proud? I'm most proud of this. I don't have a lot of pride, but I'm saying the things I've accomplished. What would it be for you?
I think the hard work paying off. And there's one specific example that kind of sticks out to me. It was a case where a guy ended up dying and he left behind 3 children. I took the case after another lawyer had turned it down, saying that they didn't think there was any value there because of mistakes that my client had made and that his employer had made and the work comp issues associated with it. But I thought that I could do good work and hopefully get something for these kids. The defendants in that case refused, like they often do, big corporations, to turn over evidence. And so me and local counsel that I was working with just kept after them and motion to compel after motion to compel. And finally, the judge had enough, which was nice because that doesn't always happen. And the judge ordered that they disclose everything. There was no more attorney-client privilege, no more work product for communications that were about the case earlier on. And so we actually got a communication between the lawyer and the adjuster who said, the value of this case is at most $1 million total. But because of the decedent's, fault in the case and his employer's fault, the most we're ever going to have to pay is $500,000. So I got to see how they set reserves and went ahead and took, I think, 6 depositions in that case. And by the end of it, I was able to get it up and settle a case for $9 million. So I could see directly the impact that my hard work in preparing for those depositions and staying after the defendants accomplished for that family. That really was nice, because a lot of times you don't know how much money they really had or were planning on paying. But in this situation, we were able to, and it's, made all the difference in this family's life, which is fantastic. That's, why we do this.
Yeah, that is a great thing where you can, really, as a criminal defense lawyer, like sometimes I look back on the year, I think about the people at home with their families this Christmas instead of locked in a jail cell where they shouldn't have been, to really give the hard work meaning, the hard work. Okay, how about the opposite end of the spectrum? Like your most painful or stuck in the craw, like regret, loss, whatever what it might be.
I think the thing that has been the worst, or stuck in my craw the most, obviously, is always losing. You feel bad for your clients, and those are the ones you always think about afterwards, and they kind of stick in your mind. And those are the drive for improving. So one of the first ones that sticks out to me is back in 2011. Another attorney in our firm had this case, and it was going to trial. They didn't want to try it, and I wanted to get into trial as much as I could. So I told them I would take it. It was like a week out from trial. The crash happened in a parking lot. The defendant was backing out of a space and hit the rear end of our client's vehicle, who was waiting to pull into another space. There was no real visible property damage. Our client waited 10 days to go and get any treatment. And preparing for trial, they had hired a DME and a biomechanical engineer. I was still learning all this stuff back in 2011, so I only had time to figure out how to handle one of those expert witnesses. And so I got Dorothy Clay Sims' book, Exposing Deceptive Defense Doctors, and went after that guy. Unfortunately, I wasn't prepared to deal with the biomechanical engineer, and he was an old pro and ended up destroying me in that case. So we got defensed, and I never wanted to let that happen again with the biomechanical engineer. So that was part of the studying and learning. And that would be one that's really drove me from the start. I would say another one that drives me is a mild traumatic brain injury. I came into the case late in that one as well. She was a teenage girl who got hit by a driver in this big Raptor pickup truck and broke her arm. We ended up getting $75,000, I think, for it, which is terrible for that. And obviously for a mild traumatic brain injury, we didn't present the case in the best way possible. And her social media pictures with smiles and everything else really hurt the case. So it helped me to kind of focus in learning how to present those cases where the client looks fine, but we know they have a lot of problems that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And that drives the wanting to learn as much as I can to have 3 to 5 options on how to present something that will stick with somebody.
It's amazing how losing can have that effect, isn't it? Just fucking drives me crazy. Fucking hate it so much. But you recently had a good win though. Was your best win, I think, of like 2.25 million with, is it Marjorie Hoff out of Vegas?
No, actually, so the last one was 2.25 million in federal court here in Arizona this year. That was with James Tawney and Alex Acosta and my partner Kellen Bradley. But the year before that was that was a mild traumatic brain injury. The year before that was actually another 7-figure verdict, 1.75 million with Marjorie Hoff out of Vegas, H&P Law. So yeah, 2023 and then 2024, I had 2 7-figure verdicts with mild traumatic brain injury.
So Ryan, you got 2 webinars coming up. I think on February 18th and 19th with Joe Freed, who is, a very close friend of mine who I know he's had a big impact on your life and so many lives, people, especially people, striving to be great at trucking. But Joe actually gave me the idea to start Trojan Horse Method back in 2014, because we were sitting outside at the Wynn. We were at a 360 advocacy conference, and he was like, Dan, if you want to get into civil work, you need to speak at civil trial conferences. I'm like, what do I speak about? He's like, what do you know that they don't know? I'm like, I've always been good with my witness prep stuff. So I showed him that stuff. And then you know what he said that to me? He goes, that's like psychodrama in a chair. Like kind of saying, that's nonsense. You're plagiarizing people's stuff. So he got me all pissed off, of course. He always laughs about this. He goes, yeah, I was just trying to motivate you, Dan. You know, everybody's got a different coaching method. You know, some people you give them a little praise. Some people tell me that they're idiots and they just fire them up. I'm just a good coach. I know how to push your butt. That's our friend Joe Freed. He's hosting you on your webinar on the 18th. What's that trial about?
Yeah, that's the trial that we had against Swift here in state court in Arizona. It was a rear end crash. We actually got brought in because the client had fired prior counsel, brought us in after disclosure and discovery. So we didn't have the case built up the way we wanted it at all. And Marjorie Hoff and I did that one and ended up with a $1.75 million verdict. The other one is his case with an Amazon delivery van where the driver hit a young boy who was crossing the road with his bicycle, or kind of like a dirt bike type thing. So he's going to be talking about that one on the 19th. And yeah, Joe Freed has been fantastic. He's been really helpful to me as well. He's actually the reason that I decided to get board certified in truck accident law, and went to the different ATA conferences that him and Leeserman put on, and has been really helpful in learning all this stuff.
Yeah, and Joe and I are teaching a boot camp March 5th through 8th in Vegas. So Joe's basically going to help people frame their case, put their cases together as if he was co-counseling on the case with them. Then we're going to help, myself and Georgia, who coaches with me, we're going to help people become much better presenters, learning the skills of presentation and connection. So I'm super, and everybody brings a case, so everybody's working on their own trucking case. And then April 1st through 5th, Satch Oliver and I are doing a similar type program, but this one's going to be more focused on his depositions, our trial approach, and getting the evidence and building cases through that methodology. So we got some great trucking stuff coming up in March and April in the boot camp methodology, to get people in small. I really just love the small groups and people like working really intently with like the great trial works. I'm doing one with Michael Hill on elder abuse, and that was going to be May, I think it's May 7th through 10th. I don't know if you know Michael Hill or not, but he is just a G. And he does elder abuse. Like, that's all he does. Is elder abuse. And he's just got some great results, which because everybody's going to get old. Arizona, you got more old people than, it's like people are getting old it's like an epidemic of elderly people there in Arizona. I'm sure they got to have good laws protecting you if you got so many of them down there. Like in Florida too, wherever you got a lot of old people, those old people tend to vote. So they like to protect those old people. They got a lot going on. They haven't got a lot going on. So Brian, other than all of your studies and stuff, I know, but like TLU On Demand, I know you watch this quite a bit. So tell us how you've utilized TLU On Demand to help you keep your learning and getting better.
So one of the things that I've kind of always done is set aside time for learning. Like you were saying before, it's, everybody has the same amount of time, and it's how you prioritize it. So if that means that I have to get into the office an hour earlier to make sure that I'm consistently learning, that's one of the things that I've done really since 2010 when I started doing the personal injury stuff. So even if it was reading a lawyer's blog, every single day, or doing what I can to learn, I've always tried to go that route. And that's one of the great things about the TLU On Demand is you can go and find the lawyers that really ring true to you, that you can do the stuff that they're doing and it makes sense from your perspective. Not everybody is a great mentor for everybody else, but you can look online and look at, the Rowleys and the Panishes and Rex Paris and those, and see what things they're doing that you might be able to implement into your practice. So even if you just take half hour, an hour, hour and a half each day to set aside and learn, TLU is the best place to go and find all that information, because there's so much that you can to learn from all of these people, and it's all right there to do on your own time. And in addition to that, you have the podcasts, which are on TLU, but I really like that they're on Spotify. So it basically, when I get into my car, it automatically syncs up with wherever I left off on the last podcast. And I can keep listening to the next one in line and just keep learning as I drive. So I really like that there is the opportunity to take it with you and be able to learn from all these greats and take away the knowledge that they've acquired over the years and are willing to share with people, which is huge. So I really have to thank you for that, just like I would thank all of them for the information that they do share.
Like, I thank all of them too, because, like, you know, I started the webinars at the beginning of the pandemic. It was really, I started because I was all by myself. And, you know, my friend Brad Eggenberg, you know, he kind of gave me the idea. He's like, hey, man, you got to find your way to serve the community. And I'm like, what do you suggest? He goes, I have no idea. He's like, I'm just telling you, you got to find some way, because people, you know, people will remember who was there for them in their time of darkness. And from a business perspective, you can be there for a time of darkness. They'll remember you when the light's back on, hopefully.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so that was, you know, really fortuitous, because also, because I was consider myself like student zero or student number one. Like, you know, when people thank me for doing this, I'm like, yeah, man, I appreciate the gratitude, because it's great to be able to help so many people. But it mostly came from a selfish standpoint. Like, I wanted to learn this stuff. I'm the curious one. I'm the one that's trying to, you know, I didn't start this civil stuff till I was 45 years old. And so nobody's mentoring Dan Ambrose at age 45. Dan Ambrose ain't getting no job in no law firm, carries, you know, being somebody's like second or third or fourth chair. That's just not going to happen, right? So I had to figure out a way to biohack it, to get all these people to teach me and to have something in it for them, which of course is obviously, you know, they get to teach a lot of people simultaneously. And the great thing about TLU On Demand too is that it's an app for your phone, so you can literally watch it anytime, anywhere. And we collect all the pleas, transcripts, and PowerPoints for all these cases. So those are all available too as starting points and guiding points and, you know, guidelines. And then, you know, I'm working with an AI company, and they're building this bot, so that way if you ask a question, it can point you out to the different programs. And then you click on those programs, kind of get a summary of that program as far as the question that you ask. So hopefully make it much more efficient to find the stuff that people are looking for too. It's been such a great learning tool. That's just grateful. I personally, because I watch my son, I don't get to see so many of the stuff, right? I was watching Satch Oliver at Depositions or Trial, because like when there's 8 lecture tracks. Oh, and it has like the last 3.5 years of live conferences, they've all been recorded, as you were saying, because there's 8 lecture tracks, like in Vegas, you know, last year, or this past, and then 4 in Huntington Beach. But then there's also these master classes in Huntington Beach too, on different topics like Lloyd Bell and medical malpractice. And Dee Robertis has done 2 master classes that were 12 hours each on employment. Dale Gallipo, 2 master classes that were 12 hours each on civil rights. You know, I mean, Joe and Satch did 3 full days basically on everything they know with trucking and depositions and speed trial and combining it all. So I got to catch up. I got a lot of learning to do. I got a lot of catching up to do myself. So I'm busy. I'm busy, Skiver. Oh, I forgot to mention too that since I'm in Cabo here, we're gonna close it out here in 1 second. But I gotta show you my view here because I've been sitting inside because there's too much background noise over there. But now, since we're almost done, this is what I've been skipping out on, Skiver.
Jealous. That's awesome.
Just because I don't know, it's hard to see. I don't know if you can see that or not.
No, I
like
see.
The pool and the ocean and stuff. So this is a Pueblo Bonito Sunset Beach. So September 14th through 21st, Ed Ciramboli and I are going to do a boot camp out here on, combining. It's a 7-day program like the ski program, but this is going to be a golf and pickleball combined with trial skills training. And Ed's really, really focused his work and his teaching on really the use of visual evidence all through trial, not just in opening and closing, but in voir dire, in direct and in cross-examination, and creating visuals for your cases. So this is, and we all know visual learners. So I'm super stoked about that one too, because it'll be limited to 10 students, and we're going to have a great time in Cabo for the week. So I had to get it arranged over here because I'm here right now and I have a timeshare in this resort. So they're going to give me some, blocks of rooms that are all together, like in the same building on the same floor. It's going to be great, Skiver. I'll give you 9 months to arrange this with your wife and your child and your trial schedule so that you could be here in Cabo.
I need that time, so I appreciate that. And actually,
see that?
I did one of your breakout sessions in 2023 with Eddie Saramboli and Philip Miller. It was great on doing the visuals in depositions. So that was, a great program. I highly recommend it.
See, it's going to be interesting to see who else decides to show. I bet Philip will show up and be like, hey, man, I want to come learn about visuals in Cabo. And maybe like Joe Freed or Satcher, some of his the guys from the ATH said, we're all learning here, man. We're all students. Let's go.
Yeah.
So it's fun too, because because we work on cases and stuff too. So the whole tuition all becomes a case expense, and a really legit one too, because you're going to get way better on that case and every case that because you're just not learning about your one case, but all the other folks that are there too. They're working on their cases and putting that evidence together, framing those cases too. So it's pretty cool, Skiver. Pretty cool. So Ryan Skiver, you're in Arizona. If people need to get a hold of, a couple things before we go here. How do they get a hold of you?
Sure. My cell phone number is 480-239-3633. Or you can send me an email. It's just my first initial and last name. So rskiver @skiverbradley.com. And it's Skiver with an I, obviously. So yeah,
we can see on your shirt, Skiver.
I know, that's what I tried to point to, but my hand didn't get there. Some people think SKY, but I figured this would make it easier, and I didn't point to it effectively. So
we get it.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions and help anybody in any way that I can.
All right. And if anybody wants TLU On Demand that doesn't have it, I'll send you a 30-day access code, complimentary. You can check it out, see if it's something that's valuable for you. Or if you just want my cross-examination we talked about of the defense medical expert, shoot me an email. And my email is dan@triallawyersuniversity.com. And my cell is 248-808-3130. So shoot me an email, shoot me a text. And if you shoot me a text, put your email on it, and I'll do my best to get it to you. In fact, I'll get it to you. My best is I will actually follow through and get it to you. But I got a lot of conflicts for the next 4 days while I'm still down here in sunny Cabo. All right, Ryan. Well, it's great hanging out with you and great seeing you.
You too.
And I will
Thank
see
you for having me.
I'm not sure, but sometime very soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Keep training too, buddy. You better be real much better next time I see you than the last time I saw you. That's all I want to say. All right. Take care.
All right, see ya.
Ready to train with the Titans and set records with your verdicts? Register for our live conferences and boot camps at triallawyersuniversity.com. Start getting your reps in before the big event by going to TLUOnDemand.com to gain instant access to live lectures, case analysis, and skills training videos from the trial lawyer champions you love and respect, as well as pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints, and notes for a roadmap to victory. Join the group that continues to get extraordinary results. Trial Lawyers University, produced and powered by LawPods.